Good day. It's Thursday, May the 27th. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. Today we're joined by Peter Londa, CEO of Tantalus Systems. Tantalus provides smart grid technologies allowing more efficient, flexible, and resilient electrical grids to help power the new electric economy. Peter, thanks for taking the time to talk with us, and let's hear the pitch.
Terrific. Thanks, Martin. Thank you for facilitating and hosting Tantalus today, and for those of you who've been able to allocate some time. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to continuing to increase the awareness of our organization. Martin, since you just gave a great introduction, I'm just going to fast forward directly to the meat of the presentation, and what we're going to intend to accomplish today is to provide a very brief introduction of who we are and what we do. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the key issues that are emerging and impacting utilities today. And Martin, to your comments, our customer base is utilities. That's who we serve. And from explaining some of the issues that are confronting utilities today, we'll talk then about how our solutions enable utilities to resolve those challenges. We'll then shift gears and talk a little bit about the financial performance of our business, and then end on a summary of some of the catalysts that are driving the growth of our organization moving forward. By all means, we'll look forward to answering questions. And Martin, if anything comes up along the way, please don't hesitate to interrupt me. With that in mind, let me first introduce who we are. So as Martin referenced, my name is Pete Londa. I have the privilege of serving as president and CEO on behalf of our board and team at Tantalus Systems. I'm joined by a very robust management team and truly a terrific collection of independent directors that provide governance and oversight to our company. A few individuals just to highlight in addition to myself, but we've got members of our team, such as Dermot O'Leary, Chief Operating Officer, who has a career of focusing on the utility industry, nearing almost 4 decades of experience. George Resnick is our CFO, who has been serving in the capacity of a CFO of publicly traded companies for Canadian publicly listed entities for over 2 decades. And myself, I've spent the last 15 years focused on businesses that are developing technology to help utilities. And within that, what we do is we are focused on the smart grid, which is a sector within the clean technology industry. At the helm of our organization, we're led by Laura Formusa as our chair. And for those of you who may not be too familiar with the North American utility industry, Laura, from our perspective, is an absolute celebrity. She is among the most accomplished female executives in North America and spent a significant portion of her career at Hydro One, where she not only served as general counsel, but ultimately served that organization as chief executive officer. Fran Harvey is another director of ours. Dr. Harvey has a long history, an entire career of serving on behalf of the power industry across the world. He was a member of Westinghouse as a senior executive, has served as Secretary of the U.S. Army at one point in his life, and now advises a number of companies in our sector. We also have some expertise in terms of capital markets and emerging companies like ours, growing from the size where we are today to becoming much more substantial in John McEwen and Tom Liston. So a collection of very experienced and diverse backgrounds as it relates to our board. For those of you who may not be too familiar with us, we actually have a rich history as a company that dates back almost 30 years, or a little bit beyond 30 years at this point. We were founded just outside of Vancouver in British Columbia and have spent the last 3 decades developing and building technology solutions to help the electric utility industry. While we've been around for some time and have a robust history. We're relatively new to the capital markets here in Canada. We initially went public on February 9th of this year through an RTO transaction, which landed us on the TSX Venture Exchange initially. And in coordination with our board, our management team, and advisors, we've been fortunate to very quickly graduate to the TSX, where we are now traded as of May 10th, so just this month. Our ticker symbol is GRID, G-R-I-D, and we've been able to amass a solid collection of institutional investors who are taking a long-term view behind our investment thesis, which we're eager to share with you today. In terms of very high level, what we do, you'll hear this term from us quite a bit as you become more familiar with our business, but we are purpose-built and purpose-driven. Fundamentally, the purpose of our organization, everything that we do in terms of our decision-making and our allocation of resources, is to help utilities improve their efficiency, reliability, and sustainability, to be more effective and impactful in delivering electricity, water, and gas to their communities. When we think about smart grid, we're talking about the automation and the digitization of the delivery of electricity, water, and gas. Three things that we all need every single day. To that end, we are now helping over 190 utilities be more efficient, reliable, and sustainable. So we've amassed a growing and thriving user community validating the benefits and the purpose of our technology. Embedded in our technology is a significant area of investment for us, is the enhancements and expansion of our enterprise software and data analytics tools. We'll talk about how that filters into our business model and revenue contributions. And you'll see some reference to a variety of different solutions that go from helping utilities turn an electric meter into an effective iPhone, not for purposes of streaming entertainment data to consumers, but ultimately accessing data in real time to make informed and predictive decisions. We also help utilities command and control how their customers, all of us on this webinar today, consume electricity as that relates to air conditioning, hot water heating, or powering our homes. We're also working with utilities to optimize the performance of their grids in light of a number of challenges that are emerging. So with that, let me transition to what's unfolding in the utility industry. And I want to dig in on this because most people and most investors that we're meeting with don't really think about their electric utility until they go home at night and turn on the lights and find out that the power's out. I'll personalize that. I have a 14-year-old daughter who I love, charming and very bright young woman. But if our Wi-Fi isn't working because of a power outage, that means she can't connect to TikTok and other social media platforms, which creates a whole new set of complexities for my wife and I as we try to take care of our family. So why does that happen? Why does power fail? What's unfolding in the utility industry that impacts our lives and our families? There are a number of issues, but there really are three that are most prevalent today. One ties to Mother Nature and the prevalence and ferocity of extreme weather that's unfortunately impacting the globe on a more frequent basis. That's leading to a fundamental shift in consumer behavior, particularly as the younger generations have more economic power and are starting to make decisions as to how to power their homes and how they'll allocate their dollars. And all the while, utilities are being asked to do more things on all of our behalves with aging infrastructure, systems that date back over 100 years in terms of design, with infrastructure that in many circumstances was deployed over 50 years ago. So a couple brief comments on that. Extreme weather. I think this speaks for itself. And while we could look at the vast impact of extreme weather lately, specifically in North America, where we focus our time and attention, Canada, the United States, and the Caribbean Basin, In the US alone last year, 2020, there were over 20 storms that in and of themselves had over $1 billion of infrastructure damage and or economic loss. It's catastrophic and life-threatening in many circumstances. And what's not on this chart is the devastating impact of what unfolded in Texas earlier this year that brought that entire state to its knees. It led to loss of life, catastrophic damage inside homes and buildings, and fundamentally what will be criminal investigations. The order of magnitude of what unfolded in Texas because of extreme weather is estimated to be almost $300 billion of infrastructure damage and economic loss. So as Mother Nature becomes more ferocious, it has a cascading impact on the reliability of delivering electricity and water and gas, which also need power. That leads to consumer behavior changes. And what we mean by that, and you'll see a lot of this in the news and in the press, and certainly hype in the investment markets, consumers are taking matters into their own hands. Not only do we see more of us wanting to improve the environment and have less of an impact on the overall environment in normal course, we're also seeing homeowners and building owners start to build more resilient infrastructure in their own homes or dwellings and premises. They're doing that through the adoption of rooftop solar as those systems become more effective, and both from a performance perspective and from a pricing perspective. We've seen widespread adoption of smart thermostats and smart appliances, all of which give more control to each of us on how we consume electricity. The likes of Tesla and Generac and some of the largest companies in this space are aggressively working towards deploying cost-effective, commercially viable battery wall storage to backstop solar panels and to mitigate some of the variability associated with those panels. And we've even seen here in the United States, all right, our new president, Joe Biden, being the first to get to test drive the F-150 Ford pickup truck, which is advertising sufficient electric power to be able to backstop and serve as a generator for homes in the event of a power outage. And full disclosure, I put my $100 deposit down to be in line for the first one that comes off the line from my local Ford dealership. The prevalence of EVs and the electrification of the transportation industry is in and of itself a growing industry. But the impact that all of these devices have on the utility industry, in our opinion, is not fully understood by the investor community, and something that the utility industry is trying to address as quickly as possible. Because as these devices get deployed in the home, as people start to drive electric vehicles, it impacts the load profile of the home. When is electricity being consumed and how much? That has an impact on the meter on the side of a home. It has an impact on the wires that connect to the house. That has an impact on the pole top transformers that are on utility poles that most of us don't think about until we see them sparking or hear them clicking because they failed. And that then has a cascading impact up to the substation. So when we think about the aging infrastructure and what utilities are dealing with as we all start to change our behavior and adopt new technologies, on the left-hand side, the utility was designed to have a central source of generation. I'll use my mouse, and my apologies for the crude use of technology here. Right? But from a central source of generation, flowing power into a substation, and from a substation down to where we live and work every day. What's unfolding is a requirement to have an integrated grid, one that's multi-directional in nature. And as we have solar panels and battery storage and solar panels on roofs, electric vehicles show up, what's happening is the grid is witnessing the generation of power in places where the infrastructure wasn't designed to support that type of multi-directional flow. And so we like to say the utility is being asked to build an internet while they're relying on technology that dates back to Morse code. Right? We could not have direct access to data through our cell phones, which I rely on all the time, but for advances in telecommunications and software and devices. And that's what's unfolding in the utility industry. So let's talk about how we help utilities transform their grids into a multi-directional network of connected devices. The first thing that we do, and where our heritage is as an organization, ties to being able to build an Internet of Things capable communications network that is proprietary to the utility, that enables utilities to protect data as cybersecurity becomes more and more of an issue for all of us. But most importantly, to access data from the very edge of their network, meters, and other devices and equipment that they've deployed. Once we help utilities actually build out the communications network with a variety of different technologies to access different devices, we then ultimately deploy the guts of our technology, which is an integrated communications module, which is effectively a Linux-based edge computing device. We don't build meters, and we don't for electric, water, and gas utilities. What we do is we build the intelligence, the computing power that gets integrated into these devices to turn them into an IP addressable smart computer. Not only are we connecting to meters for utilities, which is where the first and initial typical investment is being made, but we also have intellectual property and devices that we can connect to control load at the home. This goes beyond the meter. So as electric vehicles and solar panels and inverters show up, or smarter hot water heating systems are purchased and implemented in the home, we can help the utility have visibility into those appliances and applications, and then most importantly, command and control those capabilities to build a more resilient grid. In addition to the communications network, how do we connect to devices? Then the devices themselves, how do we extract data from those devices? We invest heavily in software and data analytics, which not only provide a presentation of the data to utilities, but also predictive capabilities to make smarter decisions on what to do, where to send their team, how to allocate their capital expenditures and their budget relative to what's actually happening on the grid as things unfold, as electric vehicles show up, as storms blow through their area. We can turn the utility into truly a network of devices that allow them to be much more reliable and ultimately much more sustainable. That purpose translates into building the sustainable utility of the future. And what we mean by that is utilities that can safely and reliably deliver electricity, water, and power. We're spending the vast majority of time on electric utilities today, and that's the vast majority of the utilities we support today, but we are quickly developing and enhancing our capabilities to also support water and gas utilities as we scale. In conjunction with deploying our technology, which is the communications, the connectivity to devices, and then the extrapolation of data and the analysis of that data, it ties to building a more resilient grid, one that can sustain and be prepared for Mother Nature, or help prevent wildfires, which we're seeing unfortunately unfold almost annually at this point in the western portions of the United States and in other portions of North America. We're helping the utilities prepare for the proliferation of distributed energy resources, and that ultimately empowers the utility to help their communities be more sustainable, attract businesses, and attract people into their communities to drive job growth and economic development. The focus on what we do in terms of building solutions that resolve immediate challenges for the utility has translated into some successful results for the company. And a few quick statistics for you. We support 190 utilities today. Once we deploy our technology, we are typically embedded and supporting that organization for over 15 years. So we are establishing very rich and very long, sticky relationships with utilities. We've been successful in delivering value to those utilities to the point where our retention rate of customers, utilities that we support, is almost 99%. And this isn't the SaaS model type retention rate of customers retained each year. We're talking about retention rate over decades of time. Because we're able to convince utilities to purchase our technology, lock into long-standing relationships for an opportunity for us to expand within those accounts, it's led to improved financial performance and ultimately our arrival and maturation to the public markets. To that end, through our financials, we've delivered 4 consecutive years of positive EBITDA. It's a good barometer for smaller companies like ours in terms of controlling what we can control. And as I had mentioned, heavy investment in R&D. We're now witnessing that over 30% of our revenue today is comprised of software and services sold into the utility. As we look forward to growth, and I'm going to dig more into this momentarily, we're capturing an enormous amount of data on an annualized basis. We've got a significant number of devices that we have not yet even deployed to utilities that gives us visibility and predictability into our financial performance in the future. And we're not only delivering improved ESG metrics for our own organization, but we're empowering utilities to improve their ESG metrics as they look to access additional capital moving forward. In terms of our financial performance, you'll see over the last several years, pretty steady growth, notwithstanding the disruption from COVID-19 in 2020. To that end, our revenue profile did compress in 2020 as compared to 2019 from $42 million. And I'd highlight, we report in US dollars. These are not Canadian dollars. The reduction in revenue between 2020 and 2019, or excuse me, from 2019 to 2020, was specifically tied to COVID-19. And COVID-19 impacted us in 2 ways. The first was the delay of deployments with existing utilities we support, and the delay of decision-making for utilities that are evaluating our technology. That's one area. The second area was disruption to our supply chain. And while we continue to work to diversify our supply chain for the components and the manufacturing of our devices that we build, sell, and deploy into the field, we witnessed in Southeast Asia fairly disruptive shutdowns of factories and plants that had a cascading impact for us for a good chunk of 2020. Despite the reduction in revenue, some things that were outside of our control at the macroeconomic level, the arrival of COVID-19 and the impact it had, we were able to demonstrate an ability as a management team to navigate through those challenges. To that end, we witnessed the highest gross margin that we've ever produced at 49%. So we're able to demonstrate scale in this organization, and we were able to control our costs, the things that management has the most control over, by continuing to deliver positive EBITDA. And if I look back at 2020, for our team's perspective, one of the greatest accomplishments that we had was not only continuing to scale and grow our user community by adding new utilities in 2020, but we navigated the year and maintained positive EBITDA without having to restructure or lay off any employees, which positions us as the world now returns to a new normal and comes out of the restrictions from COVID-19. It will allow us to accelerate the growth of our organization moving forward. To that end, Q1, which we recently reported last week, was a fairly strong quarter year over year. Revenue was up 11%. Our gross profit was up. And while you'll see modest EBITDA contributions, the large portion of that is due to the fact that as a small company, we're now absorbing the migration to the public markets and incremental cost of being a public company. We've also lost the benefit of the SHRED credit program in Canada to the tune of almost $1 million of reimbursable cost or reimbursed cash on R&D expense. So those are expenses that we'll have to absorb in the 2021 timeframe, but that we think we're more than capable and stable to do so. The statistics on the right-hand side all tie to an improving balance sheet in conjunction with accessing capital as we went public, and as we think about broadening our balance sheet and continuing to strengthen it we anticipate seeing, again, continued growth and strength of the balance sheet itself. As we think about the future, a few things have unfolded since we've gone public. First and foremost, there's been a fundamental change in the policies of the United States in conjunction with President Biden and the Democrats taking over from Donald Trump and the Republican Party. The Biden administration is very much focused on resetting the United States as a thought leader in climate change and climate control. To that end, even yesterday, the Biden administration issued an executive order to the tune of $1 billion being allocated to utilities in the United States to help the utilities prepare for extreme weather and other major events like wildfires. It puts us in an immediate position to help utilities access those dollars by investing in our technology. As we wait to see what unfolds with the stimulus package, we'd note that of the original package, while that still will go through negotiation between Democrats and Republicans, almost $700 billion was earmarked for investments in infrastructure that tie to what we do today. This is not a short-term trend. This is a multi-decade trend, given the Biden administration's efforts to decarbonize the power industry in the United States. It creates an opportunity for our investors to witness compounded growth, not just for the next few years, but for the next few decades. The unfortunate events in Texas similarly are a wake-up call, not only to the investor community, but most importantly to the utilities. While we've witnessed, and what we saw in Texas, massive investments in renewable power, all for the right reason, wind and solar in particular, the investments did not align to the automation and control of the distribution grid. What I mean by that is the vast majority of investments over the last decade in Texas have been on wind turbines and solar plants to reduce carbon emissions in their power market. While there are some very specific components to the regulations within Texas and the power market in Texas itself, what unfolded in Texas was that those renewable sources of power dropped 40,000 megawatts in 24 hours. There is no way for the Texas power system to have been able to ultimately find additional generation as the supply of power dropped exponentially. What we've learned through that Texas situation and the storms is that the lack of control on consumption did not empower utilities to really offset that imbalance from a cascading supply curve and an increasing demand curve as people got home, were cold, and cranked up their heat. To that end, we supported 7 utilities navigate through that challenge and the catastrophic storm. Fortunately, the control on the consumption side at the distribution grid level, and we're writing case studies around that today, but the utility's ability to control consumption enabled those communities to navigate through the disruption of these storms without substantial infrastructure damage, and most importantly, without putting any life at risk and without damaging people's homes. So as we continue to learn from what unfolded in Texas, the wake-up call is not only in the investments in renewables, but the automation and command and control of how we consume electricity at the distribution grid, where we focus our time and attention. I'd summarize the last 2 points of the electrification of everything. And Martin, in your opening comments, you had referenced the electrification in economy. Right? As transportation migrates to electric vehicles, that's wonderful for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's very problematic for the utilities as we think about what that means for the grid itself and access to reliable and safe power to ultimately power those vehicles. How we anticipate capitalizing on these catalysts for growth. We have a rich history now of continuing to expand our user community. To that end, over the last 8 years, we've been able to expand our user community, meaning the number of utilities purchasing technology from us, by 20% on a compounded annual growth perspective for the last 8 years. We do that through a very robust sales organization that not only has people on staff, dedicated employees, but the management of a very robust and successful sales channel. As we think about continuing to add utilities to our user community, we're also focused on ultimately getting devices deployed, accessing data from those devices, and then scaling our company through software and services. To that end, similarly, very strong compounded annual growth on the revenue contributions from our software and services over the last 8 years, with a dedicated team of almost 70 engineers today focused on figuring out how we can leverage data from the devices we deploy in the field for utilities to actually help them mitigate and avoid the challenges that they're witnessing today. Incremental to organic initiatives of landing more utilities and expanding within those accounts through software and services, we also are very actively evaluating opportunities to expand our solution portfolio through very targeted M&A. To that end, we've got a fairly robust pipeline through both our own network and through engaged investment banks to identify where we can solve more problems for utilities. And one of the unique features about our company is we can actively go talk with our user community, 190 utilities, get an appreciation for the problems that they're trying to address and what they're witnessing, and then leverage now our publicly traded stock and access to cash to go out and very strategically add bolt-on capabilities to resolve those problems. We're actively in the process of evaluating that today. In addition to looking to expand our product portfolio, we're also aggressively starting to look at how we can go beyond North America, as our technology is very applicable in other regions of the market. So as we think about our organization and where we sit today, we are trading at a discount to our peers, despite the fact that our gross margins are, in almost most circumstances, 50% better than what our peers are today, because most of our peers are also manufacturing meters. We're not building a commodity that's a low margin device. And when we think about the contributions from software and services, another way for us to distinguish ourselves against our peers, but where we sit today, we're trading at about 2.3 to 2.4 times 2020 revenue, where our peers are trading at almost 5 times revenue. So we think that creates ultimately a number of compelling investment theses, not only for existing shareholders, but for new investors that begin to track our performance, both in the form of a very substantial opportunity that's in front of us. Right? This is a decade-long initiative to help utilities prepare for the evolution of technology and the adoption of distributed energy resources. We have a proven track record of building solutions that solve problems for utilities, purpose-built solutions, with 190 growing, thriving user community that provides us with intelligence on where we need to invest our dollars to continue to help them. To that end, we have clear visibility as to where we need to grow our organization in support of that user community. And we've got a team that's been together now for an extended period of time that's built a track record of success in delivering results. To that end, we think it creates a very compelling thesis to not only help utilities reduce their impact on the environment, but also provide societal benefit to the communities that they serve. And so, Martin, with that, I'd open up for questions. And again, thank you for providing us with the opportunity to educate a broader universe of investors as we make this successful transition to the public markets.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter. Thanks for the presentation. That was very good.